We start off by looking at some of the different people who talked about the authority of some of the New Testament literature. So, for example, the Gospel of Luke is referred to as Scripture in Paul's letter of 1 Timothy. And then Paul's letters are referred to as Scripture in 2 Peter. So we can see already while some of the New Testament literature that made it in the New Testament was being written, that they were regarding Paul's letters and the Gospel of Luke as quite special, divinely inspired. Around the year 125, there was a guy named Polycarp. Now, Polycarp may and probably was a disciple of the Apostle John. Polycarp wrote one letter that has survived, and that is his letter to the church at Philippi. And in there, he quotes from Ephesians, also considered one of Paul's letters in the New Testament. He quotes from Ephesians twice and refers to it as part of the sacred scriptures. Now, that's pretty amazing that, again, Polycarp, probably a disciple of the Apostle John, is regarding Ephesians as part of the sacred scriptures. And whether he got that from the Apostle John, we just don't know. But that's pretty powerful that he would have thought that. A few years later, there was a guy named Justin. He ended up being martyr, so today we refer to him as Justin Martyr. Justin Martyr, on 16 or 17 occasions, quotes from what appeared the same thing we find in the Gospels. And he always refers to them as the memoirs of the apostles, or just simply the memoirs. What's interesting about that, a lot of times he doesn't mention the name of the author, but we can see that at least when Justin is writing this around the year 150, that the traditions that we find in the Gospels were being identified as the memoirs of the apostles. So even if we didn't know who wrote the Gospels, and admittedly there is some question today who wrote them, they're still regarded as containing apostolic testimony in them. At least that's how the early church regarded them. And again, we can see that a lot of this New Testament literature were regarded as scripture, sacred scripture. A few years after that, around the year 180, there was a guy named Irenaeus. And Irenaeus spoke of the fourfold form of the Gospels, meaning there were some that were excluded, some to be included, that there were 4 Gospels in that day that the church was recognizing as being authoritative. He doesn't list them at that point as Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but the 4 would seem to suggest that.